Merkel Media.
I'm exhausted, looking for everything in the shadows. Start looking at people like they don't matter. I'm waking up to the fact, more than a little bit shallow. I'm lost in this hole, but I don't wanna. I'm lost in this hole, 'cause I'm just trying to
What's good, guys? We're back with another episode of Free the Rabbits, and this is part 2 of our deep dive into the Akashic Records. And we're really going to focus on Rudolph Steiner today. And this was where the idea of even getting into the Akashic Records happened, because I really just was motivated to talk about Steiner in general. And I probably will talk about Steiner more on the show than I have. And there's so many different aspects you can get into with Steiner. This is just one aspect that we're going to get into today, is the Akashic Records. But we kind of wanted to say part 2 specifically for Rudolph Steiner, because we talked about so many other characters on the last part, and we really broke down what the Akashic Records are. Today, we're going to talk more about Rudolph Steiner's involvement with the Akashic Records, what he said he was able to retrieve from the Akashic Records, and we're going to talk about some interesting interactions with entities and his entire process of how you can get to the Akashic Records through these entities, through the threshold, which we talked about in the last episode with Alice Bailey, talking about meeting the entities at the threshold. And this is an important imagery with Gnostics, because you have to get past whatever entities at the threshold or interact with entities at various thresholds to move into different planes of existence. And Rudolph Steiner is no different. But Heidi's going to kick us off today about Rudolph Steiner, who he was, and really get into some of the more tertiary things before we get into the deeper aspects of who Rudolph Steiner was in regards to the Akashic Records and a lot of the really strange things that he put out there, and at the same time was saying he was a Christian. So I think that's where some people get this weird idea that he was this wholesome Christian. And again, this entire series started because I got an email from someone saying that I needed to dig deeper on Rudolph Steiner because I didn't know what I was talking about. And he's not an occultist. He was just slandered by the mainstream. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. We're going to read directly from his books and from his own mouth. And you can make your own decision on whether you think that he was legit Christian or if he was an occultist masquerading as a Christian, or what he would probably consider himself a Gnostic Christian, which is completely different than what I would consider real Christianity. Hey guys, thank you so much for being here on YouTube with myself and all the other free-range rabbits. We have just recently started Free the Rabbits merchandise with our Touch Grass shirts, Rabbit logo tees and hats, Nephilim Portal Baby tees, and our brand new Puck Wudgie Tube shirts available in all sizes with several color options. Also, for the people who've been asking how they can donate to the show financially, we have several ways to do so. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/freetherabbits, where we have monthly memberships, or you can give a one-time donation. If you are following on YouTube, we also have memberships there with different tiers, all of which have custom emojis you can use while on the channel. And if you can't donate financially, just you donating your time is the best gift possible to the show. And for that, thank you so much. Keep sharing the show, everyone. Now, let's get back into it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on here. And Steiner is a complicated, very well-documented human being. And so when I start this off, I'm just saying we've done a whole bunch of studying on this, but by no means am I a Steiner expert. People always come at me like, you don't know. And I'm like, look, I'm trying to know. And that's the best we can do. But as for Rudolph Joseph Lorenz Steiner, he was born 2/27/1861 in Croatia and died in 1925. He had 6,200 plus lectures and 50 books in his time, which is why we're having a hard time binding this together in a shorter space, because he's complicated and wordy, So he was a clairvoyant, and this is by his own description. He said by 15 years old, he had gained a complete understanding of precondition and time. So that's a very strange thing to say for a 15-year-old boy. I mean, maybe, but definitely he's already very on the road to a very esoteric life. We'll just say it that way, right? Like that's not something at 15 most boys are really thinking about. I mean, they're mostly playing football or something by then, but that's okay. Not Steiner. He was very smart. And at age 21, he met somebody named Felix Kugatsky, who spoke of the spiritual world and his experiences. And this guy was also an herb gatherer, and they met on a train. And this really opened up his mind to other things. So, as for Steiner, he was a visionary thinker. This is just a short rundown of what he was about, kind of. He was definitely involved in spiritual awakening. He was all about like meditation. He started schools, all of the Waldorf schools and Anthroposophy. And that was after a break. We'll get to that. But he gets into this biodynamic farming. He starts anthroposophical medicine, which is it's a lot of things, which also uses eurythmy, which is a form of dance that he also created. He also created, memory field for the Akashic field. And that's going to be a whole talk we'll get into here soon. He did leave Theosophy. He was originally a Theosophist, and he left over Krishnamurti because he was upset that they were calling it a messianic figure, and him and Annie Besant had this huge fight, and he ends up leaving and breaking off and doing his own thing. And we're going to get into anthroposophy and a whole bunch of
Real
stuff.
quick about that,
quick and
was
dirty.
Interesting about that whole incident when he left Theosophy was that years later, it was discovered that he was not indeed the Messiah or Jesus when they claimed that he was. And he actually came out himself and said that he wasn't. So it's pretty funny that Rudolph Steiner left because of that, when in actuality, years later, it turned out that Rudolph Steiner was correct all along. So I just want to throw that in there because that's a very interesting piece.
Yeah. Yes. Anytime you got something, just stop me so we can, do it together. And also, he was Rite of Mizraim. And so, if you look it up, they'll say, oh, he wasn't a Freemason. Well, no, he's a practicing Freemason because he's a Martinist, right? Initiated 11 of 1905. His certificate is available online to actually look at that and see that he definitely was. And he, was a complex A very complex person. That is for sure. Like, I don't know that I've ever been so confused about how to rein in a podcast in my life. Like, I don't know how you felt.
Yeah, because he's got so many layers to him, and he reminds me a lot of Crowley in the sense
Yes.
of it's just so much information out there that I have a hard time finding it all. And you're never
Yes.
going to, I don't think. I think when I'm and me personally, I'm really big on Crowley research, and he just is constantly coming up in different things that I don't think he's supposed to show up in. I'm like, why is he showing up here? This is a whole other side of him I didn't know, but that's why he's such an integral, important part of the modern occult movement. And I also think, to your point, that Rudolph Steiner was a very big part of the modern occult movement as we know it today.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, for those people that say he believed in Christ, he did, but it's not the same way as Christ is for us. Like, it's like the Christ is in everything and it's in the earth. I have the whole story written down because we can get to that, but when it's time, but it's not how you would normally think of Christ, our Savior, in the traditional Christian sense. We'll just put it that way. So, but nevertheless, very interesting. I mean, some of his stuff, this is the problem with him. He has a lot of great ideas. Like biodynamic farming was super smart and it was very successful and it helped everybody. And the Waldorf schools, this is one thing I can really appreciate is that they say they don't indoctrinate the kids really into the whole religious aspect of it until they're out. They don't want it impressed upon them. Do they do things that would influence them? Yes, but it's not, as outward, like if you went to a Catholic school or you went to a Mormon school or whatever, it's going to be more in your face. And he was very like, no, just let them come to it, naturally type of thing, which, I can appreciate it. He also said, like I told you the other day, you want to ascend, go push a handicapped person on the beach. Like, man, you can't argue with some of that stuff, right?
Don't push
But
him
then,
over, though.
yeah, don't put him in the water. Yikes. And I mean, it's like he has great ideas sometimes, and then he, gets into reversing the Lord's Prayer and it gets weird. But like, I don't know, with any time you pervert, we don't add to or take away from the gospel, right? Because of this reason, because like, we don't know where this was really coming from, and you're tapping into some crazy places. So, yeah, it gets intense. So, that's just like the quick rundown of just a very brief part of his life. It's going to get a lot more. His works are more intensive than his little parts of his regular life, So, yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely layered. And to the point of anthroposophy, it actually continued long after he passed, too. And the entire religious movement, which was founded in the early 20th century, it basically put out the idea that the existence of an object, intellectually comprehensible spiritual world is accessible to the human experience. So this is, in a nutshell, anthroposophy was the idea that you could go into the spiritual world and interact with it, interact with the beings there, and receive the download, which would be the Akashic Records. And he also said that all of the followers that followed anthroposophy, their aim and the aim that he gave them was to engage in spiritual discovery through a mode of thought independent of sensory experience. So this is he really focuses on the mind out more so than he does anything physical. That was really what he pushed into. And you can find that out when you look at even the roots of the word anthroposophy, and it's built off of the Greek anthropos, which is human, but then Sophia, which is wisdom. And if you know anything about Sophia and what Plato and many other alchemists and occultists and Gnostics have talked about, Sophia is not only wisdom, but she is also the counterpart to the monad, which she would be the divine feminine of God. So she is the opposite of God in the sense of she's the feminine and the monad is the masculine. And for people that aren't too familiar with Gnosticism, these are at the top of the hierarchy chart. So this is the creators of the immaterial world. So the demiurge, or what they consider Yahweh, or whatever, insert whatever name you want to there, because they'll name the demiurge different names. That's the creator of the material world. Now, what they think is that the demiurge, the creator of the material world, is actually evil and wants to trap us here and doesn't want us to understand our true purpose by being able to reincarnate enough times that we can become this being that can challenge Yahweh. Some say at the gates of Amenti, the halls of Amenti. There was gates in these halls of Amenti that you can get past Yahweh and move into this other realm. And that's the idea in a nutshell. But the entire idea of anthroposophy is built on Gnosticism through and through. And he was a known Gnostic. I mean, this isn't even up for debate. Now, they will consider him a Christian Gnostic because he does use the Bible for a lot of references throughout his works. He does reference Jesus a lot, but he considers Jesus an ascended master. He considers Jesus to be a great prophet. Jesus is not the Son of God. He is not God himself in the flesh. This is what they consider. So this is where that weird idea happens where, oh, he's a Christian. Well, I guess maybe if you're a Gnostic, you consider him to be a Christian because you believe in the idea of Christ consciousness, that we can all become Christ. But that's what he believed. And anthroposophy was the idea of how to do that. Now, as we move deeper into Rudolph Steiner, one of the more interesting books that he wrote, and we're going to talk specifically about two, and I know you have several pieces of information from other books and other writings that he has today. But two of the ones I really went deep into that I'm going to talk about today is the cosmic memory and then the knowledge of higher worlds and its attainment. Now, the cosmic memory talks specifically to the Akashic Records. This is when he first talks about them, and he breaks it down, how it works, and then he divulges the info of what he discovered when he tapped into the Akashic Records. And this is where we're going to get into the root races. And I think that's important to talk about today because we're going to get into the Aryan race, which he says we are in now. And this is where you're going to get this crazy verbiage from him about hybrids that can talk to the gods, that receive information from the gods, that give it to the rest of humanity. It's super wild. But the cosmic memory was originally written in a periodical called the Lucifer Gnosis. And he wrote all these different articles, and they ended up compiling them later and put them in a book called The Cosmic Memory. And what he thought Lucifer was, and he said, Lucifer is the light spirit which plays on human pride and offers the delusion of divinity, but also motivates creativity and spirituality. Lucifer is the light bearer, carries the message of spirit and denial of the material. So actually, Lucifer is here to teach us how to move into the astral plane, how to get past the demiurge. So Lucifer is actually good. Yahweh's actually evil. And you see where we're at now, we're back in the Garden of Eden. We're back in that part. And what's really funny about a lot of Gnostics, they believe that in the Old Testament, that was the lie that Yahweh gave us, that Lucifer was actually good and Yahweh was actually evil. It's the tale as old as time. Let's just trick people by switching it up. And if you are open to talking to these entities and believe they have your best interest at heart, you're going to believe whatever they say. And that's where they're getting this information from, Heidi.
Yes. And for people that don't have a great understanding, I think you explained really good about the Gnostic world. And I just wanted to throw in, for him, Theosophy's definition is divine wisdom, but Anthroposophy's is wisdom of the human being. So he flipped it around and he brings it back toward the person, basically. And, this might be a good place to bring in about Jesus. I don't know if you want me to go there.
Go ahead.
Okay. So his cosmic memory, he said that he went in and he got this from the Ghost Library. Don't forget about the Ghost Library in the sky. And he talks about specifically Jesus. And he says, these are the spiritual records that are the fifth gospel with details. And this is from his clairvoyant readings about Jesus Christ's life that's been forgotten or not covered in the Bibles. Now, remember, this is not real. Like this didn't come from somebody or somebody wrote it down. This is from the Ghost Library in the sky. So, Akashic field is what he likes to call it. So these lectures took place, if anybody wants to look them up, between 10 of 1913 and 2 of 1914. There's 13 lectures about this. And he says that Jesus's early life, he has this mystery of Golgotha. He says Christ went into Jesus at around 30 years old when he was baptized. So, like, he wasn't originally the Christ. He became the Christ when he gets baptized. And this was a cosmic event where his spirit, like, entered him from the solar into human form. And so this is his idea, not mine. There's more details of his struggles with Lucifer and somebody named Arman, and we're going to get to him. It's a very Abraxas. If you guys are familiar with Abraxas, it's very similar. It's like, the good, the bad, they have to be level, but I'm sure we'll get into that. So I'm not going to go there right now. But he says a lot about that. He also gives more details with conversations actually dictated with Mary, and that she is the feminine and the divine wisdom. So the Golgotha Christ impulse entered the earth at crucifixion. So when he died, this sun spirit that entered him at baptism went into the earth, which is why everything can become then God, right? If you're part of the earth, then therefore you can be one with that. But also, this one was really good. There's 2 Jesus children, and their names are Nathan Jesus. And Nathan Jesus is from the line of David. He's innocent and divine and a pure soul. He is from the original Adam. And then there's Solomon Jesus, and he's the king line Jesus, and he's the reincarnation of Zarathustra. So, and I hope I said that right, you guys. Don't come at me. And at 12 years old, with the whole story of Jesus at the temple, these two somehow merge. It didn't say how. It just said they became one, somehow merged together, and therefore became the universal cosmic being that came to help mortals like you and I develop their I. And I don't mean eyeball, like I as in I am. So their spirit self. And this happens through moral and ethical purification, inner stillness and meditation, training and imagination cognition, meditation, spiritual, strength and etheric and astral, cultivating reverence and devotion, avoiding astral distortion, and committing to spiritual schooling. So it gets, that's a lot. That's not the Jesus. I've never heard of Nathan Jesus, but now I have. And so when we talk about Steiner being a Christian, this is the Christ figure we're talking about. And this being came from the sun, which just sounds, we're back to Egypt. So to me, but that there's nothing, if people want to think that, that's fine. I'm just saying it's probably not Christianity as a whole as how we would define it.
Right. And the idea that when he died, that the Christ went to the earth to then allow us to become essentially the ascended masters ourselves with enough work, with enough occult knowledge. And we have to become an initiate in a mystery school to be able to do so, according to Rudolph Steiner, as a matter of fact, because we're going to get into that as we go deeper into the cosmic memory. But you're right. It's not true Christianity. It reminds me a lot of things that were pumped out from the Essenes, the Cathars, the Manichaeans, the Mandaeans. All these different Gnostic groups were pumping out a different version of that idea. And it's funny that he did bring up these Christ children that merged together, but it does play into Gnosticism because I can't tell you any Gnostic that doesn't believe that Jesus didn't have children. So they all do, and they've been pushing us for a long time. And this is what they are said to be protecting behind the scenes. And this is what the real hidden bloodlines are. However, I just did a 4-part series on it, and I explained through crazy amounts of research what I believe those bloodlines really are that they're hiding.
By the way,
I really appreciate that. And it is something completely different than the actual bloodline of Jesus, which does not exist, but they are protecting these, what I believe, Nephilim bloodlines, and they are masquerading it as the bloodlines of Jesus. But it's funny that Steiner has his own Gnostic version of what that means too. Now, his is a little more etheric because everything that he built around anthroposophy was what's going on in the mind and the spirit. It's all about the astral realm. It's really not about what's here on earth. And to that point, and I talk about this a lot on the show, and I'll probably eventually do a really deep dive on it, but it goes all the way back to Plato and the theory of forms too for some of these Gnostics, where the world's not really even material. It's all holographic, and we're just here in what we think is a reality, and it is to an extent, but it's not actually tangible, and that Jesus was implemented in as a hologram here, and he wasn't actually here. He was always spirit, which I have a hard time buying. I'm not totally against the idea of simulation theory or matrix, but all this has to be divinely worked through God. And it's tough sometimes for me to buy all the way into that. I'm not saying that I'm not open, because I've heard some guys that are really good Christians that have a concept that seems to work in that realm, but it's a very Gnostic idea at its root core. So we have to look at some of these different ideas that come out and say, what's it grounded in originally? And I think that we look at Rudolph Steiner, and everything that he had was built around the etheric spiritual world. So for him, the Christ is the spirit entity that was implemented into Jesus, that Jesus was never really God. This was just the spirit that was implemented into him. And then it spread out within the earth that we can all tap into when he died.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, I can appreciate other thoughts on things, but I just think to label it just Christianity is a disservice, because it's not. And, everything that he speaks about, if you know anything about Martinism, it's very Martinist, right? It's the way of the heart. It's the way it's half of Martinism. Cagliostro really wanted to do things in the physical, but not Martin, which is who it was named after. And so he's much like Martin, where he's like, everything's in yourself. Like it's not really needed. You don't need to go out at whatever time in the morning and do these weird rituals and stuff. It's all inside of you. But everything that he tries to work towards is this I am, right? It's very, if you've have you read the 7 Sermons to the Dead?
I haven't read that one, no.
It's very similar. Obviously Steiner came probably first, I would assume. Yeah. But it's very similar. And that's why I said Abraxas, even though it's not, it's a lot the same. So.
Well, yeah. And most Gnostics believe that from Abraxas came Jesus. So that is also one of the ones I just roll my eyes to the back of my head so I can see my own brain like just exploding, because the fact that this chicken-headed God, this rooster-headed God, was the one that gave us Jesus is one of the most absolutely ludicrous things I've ever read. But they've got full-on dissertations about how this works. So I do find the Abraxas entity fascinating, and there have been many reports, even as of recent, especially during the pandemic era, where there was a guy over in the UK that was actually trying to bring Abraxas here. He was doing a set of rituals that was trying to do that.
And I don't doubt that these things work. Look, these rituals and stuff, like I've said before, they would have been already gone. If all these people did them and they never worked, it would be gone, because they'd be like, that's a waste of time. Clearly, people are tapping into something. And I don't doubt that. I don't doubt one bit. It's just back to the John Dee story, right? We're like, okay, like, is this a bad witch or a good witch, right? Like, yeah.
Here's an interesting thought that I ran across recently that really, I just was putting some things together. And one of the most interesting things about Gnosticism is the ability to summon different entities, very high entities up the chart. We're talking like Abraxas and some of these other ones. But have you ever noticed there's no ritual to invoke Yahweh ever? And
Mhm.
he's supposed to be the most evil of all, but yet there's nobody trying to get to him or invoke him because you can't. And there's a reason why you can't, because he's actually not evil. He's actually the God above all gods. He's the creator. So that's the funny part. When you really start looking into it, it doesn't work. And there's a reason why it doesn't work, because you're not going to be able to summon a creator who, one, he actually loves us. And if he does show himself, it will be in a format where he's here to speak to you. We know how he appeared to the prophets many different times throughout the Bible. But in that aspect, I just find that very fascinating, where we can go through all these different gods and how to bring them here through different rituals. But there's mysteriously no ritual to bring Yahweh here, but he's the evilest of all. And you'd be thinking, if he was going to dictate this material world, and there are people that want to rule the material world, they'd be trying to invoke him. They'd be trying to bring him to them so they could obtain some sort of power. Well, guess what? There's not one for the people that think there is.
Right. And it's always like, oh, you don't want to talk to that thing anyway, because that's an evil thing and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I'm just like, okay. Like, to your point, they bring everybody else down here that they think what they think they do. I don't think any of these things are what they say they are. So I think they come. I just don't think they are who they say.
Right. And off air, we were talking about a bunch of different stuff before we came on there, and you brought up Lilith, right? It made me think about that. And one of the interesting things about Lilith is many people throughout the centuries have had interactions with Lilith. But the really interesting part is it's not always the Lilith, because she has Liliths that are demonic entities that work for her, but as emissaries for her, they will represent her as Lilith, and they will appear in a Lilith-like form. And I believe that there is, just like angelic hierarchies on Yahweh's side, there are demonic and fallen angelic hierarchies on the other side, and they all operate within a very rigid structure. And I think that there are many times these upper tier generals, and they have small contingents that work for them, and they will just say that I'm this because they are working for said entity. So to your point, completely agree with that. And I think that when people think that they're talking to said entity, you're probably not. You could be, but how do you know? Because they're
Right.
deceptive through and through. That's their nature. So why are they going to tell you the truth about anything?
Yeah, I mean, well, I just think it's funny because all of the people that have ever invoked and got an answer, right? Later on, even Crowley was like, nah, I hate that guy now because I wrote the book of the law and he's a liar. And I'm like, okay, even Crowley said it. Like, come on. Like, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think they're telling the truth.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think you really brought us into the cosmic memory by telling us what he thought about who Jesus was. And I really want to get into some of the interesting concepts of the Akashic record, what he said he saw. And we'll talk specifically about the Aryan root race, which all theosophists and any occultist that believes in root races believes we're in the Aryan root race right now, which is supposed to be the most advanced spiritually and advanced technologically of any of the other root races there are. But this book, The Cosmic Memory, it was a compilation of essays, and the essays were originally written in 1904 and 1908. But then the book that was the compendium of all of them was put out in 1959 in its first English edition. So you can here's the thing. People think these books are hard to find. Guess what? You can type them up and find a free PDF online for most of these old books because you can just find them anywhere. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of theosophical sites and occult sites that'll just have them there. I was just talking about Alice Bailey's books. You can literally go to the luciustrust.org and all of her books are there. You could just go and read them on the site. You don't have to download anything. You can just go read them. So most of these occultists and Gnostics have their books widely available, especially if they're older. You can just go find them. A lot of Liebers are out there too that are free to pick up. Crowley, Parsons, any of them, right? They're so easy to find. And I find it fascinating when people will say things like, you don't know what you're talking about, or he didn't say that, when the books are so easy to find. And I go to the source. I don't generally read people talking about people. I might use that as a jump off source, but I'm going to go straight to the source. I want to know what they said, because when you get into what they said, 9 times out of 10, it's even more fantastical and crazy than what somebody was writing about them. Because I'm getting deep into what they're saying. I'm like, oh, this is absolutely insane. Like,
yeah. Oh my gosh. So true. So true.
So we're going to get into what he talks about, these root races, and what he is saying that the original root race was, and how it spawns into the later root race that we're going to talk about. But before we even get to that, though, he's got a preface that he wrote for this book, and it's actually called the Akashic Chronicle. And he does refer to the Akashic Records as the Akashic Chronicle as well. That's another term that he uses. And he starts it off with, by means of ordinary history, man can learn only a small part of what humanity experienced in prehistory. So he's talking about written history, right? We can only learn so much. Historical documents shed light on but a few millennia. What archaeology, paleontology, and geology can teach us is very limited. Furthermore, everything built on external evidence is unreliable. Now, the reason why he brings up paleontology, geology, archaeology is because at his root core, he completely believes in science. One of his big things was the marriage between science and spirituality. So he's also a very methodical researcher, methodical scientific experimenter when it comes to the spiritual world. So he's letting you know now that science isn't devoid of spirituality. People are trying to tear those two apart when there actually should be married. So then he says, one need only to consider how the picture of an event or people not so very remote from us has changed when new historical evidence has been discovered. So this kind of gets into hidden history a little bit. And he is a big proponent of hidden history, obviously, because he's going to get into all these different root races, specifically the Atlanteans, which is a big one for Theosophists, because that's kind of where we had our connection to nature. That's where nature was the life force. And I'm going to talk about what he talks about specifically about the Atlanteans and what their ability was to dematerialize things around them and use them as energy. So it's really wild how he gets into that too. He says, one need but compare the descriptions of one and the same thing as given by different historians, and he will soon realize on what uncertain ground he stands in these matters. I don't think he's necessarily wrong there, Heidi. I think that we can look at past history and we can understand that there are things hidden from us. There are things that have been disrupted. There are spiritual forces and governmental forces that have hidden certain things from us, right? So we do know that that's happened. So he's leaning into that kind of hard. He says, everything belonging to the external world of the senses is subject to time. In addition, time destroys what is originated in time. On the other hand, external history is dependent what has been preserved in time. Nobody can say that the essential has been preserved if he remains content with external evidence. So what he's trying to tell you is the external evidence that we see can sometimes lead us to this spiritual evidence, but we have to do what? We got to learn how to tap into this Akashic Chronicle, this gnosis. He says, when he gets into what he is talking about, the Akashic Chronicle, he says, it is a fact that this history is written in other characters than is ordinary history. Well, how do we get to these other characters? In Gnosis and in Theosophy is called Akashic Chronicle. Only a faint conception of this chronicle can be given in our language. Oh, so we can't even really tap into our language. What language are we tapping into? I would probably throw Enochian as part of that. For our
Definitely.
language corresponds to the world of the senses, that which is described by our language at once receives the character of this sense world. To the uninitiated, to the uninitiated who cannot yet convince himself of the reality of a separate spiritual world through his own experience, the initiate easily appears to be a visionary, if not something worse. So he is talking about the idea that you need to be an initiate. And he even says down a couple paragraphs later, such a history and prehistory does in fact exist in all mystery schools. So
Mhm.
I'm sorry to the people that think that he is a Christian, but he's talking specifically to mystery schools. And you need to be an initiate into one of these mystery schools, whichever one is your flavor, to get access to these entities to then be able to tap into this Akashic record and start understanding hidden history, understanding what's happened before us.
Yes. And I just find it interesting that when we look at this, oh, it gets so confusing. If you were born up in this, you would have it, right? But if you didn't, like there's multiple antichrists and worlds and planets and this and that. It's super confusing. Could you ever imagine wrapping your head around this as like a convert in,
Mm.
I couldn't.
That's a very interesting way to put it, too. And I think Rudolph will throw people off sometimes. And recently I was reading a few articles that people wrote about him, and they said what was interesting about Rudolph Steiner is his ability to, on the one hand, seem very open to helping mankind, and everybody's got access to this mystery, right? But on the other hand, saying that, well, you have to be one of the chosen. You have to have this innate ability to become an initiate. And then you can find yourself in a position to obtain this Akashic Chronicle, obtain this hidden knowledge. And that's what you'll find the double speak a lot with these occultists and Gnostics. They'll tell you on the one hand that anyone can do it, but on the other hand, they'll say, well, only the few chosen can do it. And I don't know what you think about that, Heidi, but it is very interesting verbiage when they talk out of both sides of their mouth, because it's really not for everyone. And they do want to feel special. They do have large egos. As much as they want to say they're killing the ego, they're not. Because to say that only the select few can obtain this, you're not killing the ego, you're actually enhancing it.
Oh, for sure. And on top of that, he's basically saying when we get into the root race thing, if you are not white, if you're black, he puts that like an animal. Like it's so bad, and I'm not going to open the whole can of worms, but like you literally can't control what color you were born. And so, he says you can. He says you did, at some point this is something that you did, and that's so awful. And it reminds me of the Mormons. A lot of his stuff that he says, I'm like, he must have read the Book of Mormon, because uh, he talks about the Elohim. He talks about this eighth sphere where it's like purgatory, and that's like where apostates go. And it's just this whole thing. And so I'm like, look, I get what he's saying about being chosen, but anytime when you start doing that, it's going to lead to violence. You can beat me. Anytime you start saying that stuff, it will just lead to I'm special, you're not, you're less than. It just is a bad plan. It's a bad plan. I don't know.
Yeah, and to get to the root races, I'm going to actually list the 7. I won't go into the sub root races because each 7 has another 7, right? So
It's a lot.
it's a lot. And this came straight out of Theosophy. What's interesting, though, the second root race, which is the Hyperborean root race, that ties directly into what? the Nazis. That ties directly into the Vril Society. So they're big on Hyperborea. They're big on this particular group of people. So it starts with the Polarian, and they say the first root race was ethereal. They were only composed of etheric matter. Matter of fact, they reproduced dividing like an amoeba. So the second root race, which I just brought up, the Hyperborean, they were colored golden yellow. Their skin was golden yellow. And they actually were reproducing asexually, which is also a very interesting concept. So this is all in with evolution too, because Theosophists and all these occultists were big into Darwinism. So this was their way of marrying Darwinism with spirituality, because they believe that they should be married together. So then you've got the third root race, which I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard of, the Lemurian, and this comes from Lemuria. And I've done some talks about Lemuria and it being a large mass of land. I think there's some evidence for that, depending on how you look at different mythologies throughout history, and even modern day people who live in areas like the Solomon Islands, where they talk about Mu and they talk about what people consider what could be Lemuria. So I don't put that out the realm of possibility at all. And most people know by now that I'm an old earth creationist. And if I'm an old earth creationist, I think that there were probably large masses of land that are now underwater, and there were civilizations and cities. So again, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, but I think that we have to look at this through a Christian lens if we're going to try to figure out exactly what's going on here. Now, you got the fourth root race, which we're going to talk about here in a second, because it's important to get us to the fifth, but the Atlanteans. And Atlanteans are really, really big in not only the New Age, but also in its predecessors with Theosophy and even the Golden Dawn. A lot of these guys talked about the Atlanteans. So when you get out of the Atlanteans, you go directly into the Aryan, the fifth root race, and that's us. So the fifth root race, we'll definitely talk about what he thinks about them in specific. Now, the sixth and the seventh root races have not happened yet. So they're not even been named because they haven't happened yet, but they speculate what abilities those may have. There's all kind of various different ones. And again, I'll probably do an episode on root races at some point and get deeper into that. But we want to stick to the Akashic and why that he was talking about this. Now, to get to the Atlanteans, he says that logical reason, the power of a arithmetical combining on which everything rests that is produced today were totally absent among the first Atlanteans. So he's saying that logic, reasoning, using of arithmetic, they didn't need that. Now, he says, on the other hand, they had highly developed memories. This memory was one of the most prominent mental faculties. He says, for example, the Atlantean did not calculate as we do by learning certain rules, which he then applied. A multiplication table was something totally unknown in Atlantean times. So instead of that, what they would do is they would remember an identical situation, and that's how they would know how to add or subtract or whatever else. They were just so in tune with nature that they would actually be able to synthesize anything around them that was in nature. And he says the Atlanteans could control what one calls the life force. He says, as today one extracts energy of heat from coal and transforms it into motive power for our means of locomotion, the Atlanteans knew how to put the germinal energy of organisms into the service of their technology. One can form an idea from the following. Think of a kernel of seed grain. In an energy lies dormant. This energy causes the stalk to sprout from the kernel. Nature can awaken its energy, which reposes in the seed. Modern man can do it at will. He then says he must bury the seed in the ground and leave the awakening to the forces of nature. Now, he says the Atlantean could do something else. He knew how one could change the energy of a pile of grain into technical power. So they could take nature, turn it into technical power, similar to like we would do with coal or gasoline or anything else. So they just had a different type of connection to nature to be able to do that. Again, this is all the stuff he's seeing in this Akashic record. He's tapping into these entities. They're giving him this knowledge, this download, and he's seeing in his mind, in this astral realm, what these people are doing with this energy.
Okay. So as for the energy part, I mean, I will say this for Steiner. Look, he tapped into something and no different than Casey. Casey wasn't wrong, right? Like how many people did he help? How many people was he right about? And he's made some very interesting predictions. I don't know if you've gotten into them. Have you gotten into these weird? This is what I was writing down. Predictions. Okay, this is a fun one. So for those that don't fully comprehend, like think of a kite, like an old fashioned kite. Okay. And Lucifer is on one side and Ahriman's on the other. So they balance each other. And then, so a cross, right? Just do a cross and then the kite, like design around it. And Christ is at the top. And this Sorat, which is the deep antichrist, is at the bottom. Okay. And everything's all about these things. Okay. But Lucifer isn't it just about, beauty and knowledge. He's about pride and all these other things, but he's an older entity. But this Ahriman, okay, this Ahrimanic force that he talks about, he's kind of right. He talks about it being very into technology and that this is going to be how the end of the world kind of gets, like how this antichrist situation will come about again. And that Ahriman is like really full of himself, all about, tech and all these things. And he basically, everybody that studies this stuff, well, not everybody, but many of the people I've spoken to, because I know this one lady and she's great, and it's Debbie Elliott, and she actually had her channel taken down, and which is weird because all she talks about is Steiner and she doesn't ever do anything like mean or interview people or anything. She was great, but she talks about how he predicted this clear back in 1917 that they were going to find a way with technology to get to us, and it will be our downfall. Okay, that's one piece of it with Ahriman, and it gets way deeper. Like everything with him is deep. This is so surface level, but this one got me. I was looking for the actual quote because you said it the best, like put it in their own words. So a way will be found to, give people something. We'll just put it that way into bodies so that those bodies will not allow the inclination towards spiritual ideas to develop. And all their lives, people will believe only in the physical world that they perceive with their senses. Rudolph Steiner, 1917. So basically, he's saying they will start giving us things that they give us all the time now with little pokey things that will make us completely not have interaction in our souls with God. Right. And well, they found like the whole God particle thing and the little numbers of it, this gene inside. It's kind of spicy because I think he was sort of right there. But we know these things will tell us like two truths and a lie or vice versa. So, I mean, I just think he obviously did tap into something because we're seeing it play out in this day and age. But also, it's so much and it's so out there. Like, I mean, if you say 6,200 lectures, are you going to be right about something? But that one was pretty out there for me. I don't know. Did you read that one?
I haven't read that one, and that's pretty wild because of where we've been in the past 5 years. And I think that absolutely, I think Rudolph Steiner was right about a lot. So I don't even think that that's up for debate. That's just like saying Aleister Crowley was right about a lot of stuff or Parsons was right about a lot of stuff. They were. It's just the lens that they're looking at it from. I have had talks with Tony Merkel about something happening in a room that's paranormal. And say I'm in a room and say someone who is involved in Wicca is in the room. We're going to perceive that event through our worldview. And how we perceive that event through our worldview is how it's going to dictate our lives and how we're going to be able to present it to other people. And I think it's very similar to these occultists that write or ones that are quote unquote tapping into this Akashic record. They're seeing it from a different worldview than you and I might, Heidi. We might see it from a worldview of Christianity, and we may understand these entities to have nefarious purposes, whereas they're going to view it as these are divine beings that are giving us knowledge. And to that point, that brings us to the Aryan fifth root race. And man, he goes deep here. And I just am blown away. One, that again, back to this email that I got about Rudolph Steiner being a Christian and how
This
you
is
can
not going to be
even
Christian
at all. And this is pretty wild when he gets into the movement from the fourth root race, which is the Atlanteans, into the Aryans, which we're in now. So he says, what has previously been said about the fourth root race, the Atlanteans, refers to the great bulk of mankind, but they followed leaders whose abilities towered far above theirs. The wisdom these leaders possessed and the powers at their command were not to be obtained by any earthly education. They had been imparted them by higher beings, which did not belong directly to earth. Therefore, it was only natural that the great mass of men felt their leaders to be beings of a higher kind, to be messengers of the gods. For what these leaders do and could do would not have been attainable by human sense organs and by human reason. They were venerated as divine messengers, and men received their orders, their commandments, and also their instruction. It gets even crazier. It was by beings of this kind that mankind was instructed in the sciences, in the arts, and in the making of tools. What does that sound like right there? The Book of Enoch. It's literally the Book of Enoch of angelic beings, the Watchers, bartering with mankind to get access to their women by giving them technology. So then he goes on to say such divine messengers, either directly the communities themselves or instructed men who were sufficiently advanced in the art of government. So only these high up elites are the ones worthy of this communication by the gods. It was said of these leaders that they could communicate with the gods and were initiated by the gods themselves into the laws according to which mankind had to develop. This was true. In places about which the average people knew nothing, this initiation, this communication with the gods actually took place. These places of initiation were called temples of the mysteries. From them, the human race was directed. Oh, it gets even wilder. What took place in the temples of the mysteries was therefore incomprehensible to the people. So we're talking about the regular old people, right? We're not talking about what he's saying, these high up government elites. He's talking about regular people. Equally, little did the latter understand the intentions of their great leaders. After all, the people could grasp with their senses only what happened directly upon earth, not what was revealed from the higher worlds for the welfare of the earth. Therefore, the teachings of the leaders had to be expressed in a form unlike communications about earthly events. The language the gods spoke with their messengers in the mysteries was not earthly. Oh, it goes to that Enochian language I just mentioned. And neither were the shapes in which the gods revealed themselves. The higher spirits appeared to their messengers in fiery clouds in order to tell them how they were to lead men. Only man can appear in human form. Entities whose capacities tower above the human must reveal themselves in shapes which are not to be found on earth. Because they themselves were the most perfect among their human brothers, the divine messengers could receive these revelations. And here's the line, the one right here. This is where it just, you know what Steiner means, and we're going to know as Christians what it means, but the average person might not really get it. They're going to think, oh, it's a star child. I'm one of those. They belonged among their fellow humans only in a certain respect. They could assume human form, but their spiritual mental qualities were of a superhuman kind. Thus, they were divine human hybrid beings. This is straight out of Rudolph Steiner's mouth. This is straight pen to the page. This is him telling you that these people, these bloodlines, these hybrid beings need to lead us. This is where you can get easily initiated into the mystery schools if you have this divine spark, if you have what's needed to take you to the next level. And I just was absolutely blown away as I'm digging through Steiner to find that, because he's telling us we are in the age of that. This is the Aryan race. This is where we're moving into. We need to be led by these people. That doesn't sound very much like we're all on the same scale, that we all can achieve this quote unquote godhood and move into the pleroma and become an ascended master. It seems a lot like elitism, Heidi.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And these beings that he's talking about, because they say that we live with our body on the 8th sphere and our head is in the 4th. And so it's like we're split apart into two worlds, but the creators of us, so i.e. and they do say creators with an S, are these things called Elohim. Well, if you look that up, it gets real interesting, especially when he's talking about hybrids, because we just talked about what you just said there. And I'm like, okay, they're usually gods, but not the God, not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay. And I know this because I've studied a lot, because the Mormon God is named Elohim, and that's plural. And it doesn't matter how much you want to sugarcoat this or anything else. You're also having to go to other things, like Michael has to intervene on your behalf to go save you from Sorat, this demonic guy. Like, and look, like, then it takes away anything that God does for us. Like, then we're just going to this guy and that guy and this angel. And now it sounds like Catholic saints, right? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is just mind blowing to me that he's using the type of verbiage that we understand scripturally. But he's using it in a very different way. And it all leads back to bloodlines of the divine who are given authority here on the earth. And he's telling us here in this Aryan 5th root race that these are the people that we need to be looking to guide us, because we're at the bottom of the totem pole and we can't commune with the gods. That's the really interesting part. You can't commune with the gods unless you are special. So I believe also
And
that's
white.
why,
And white.
and white.
By the way.
Absolutely. And don't let anyone tell you that he didn't think that way, because eugenics is also a massive part of Theosophy. It's a massive part of many of these mystery schools. Don't think for a second that what Adolf was doing wasn't pushed by his knowledge of the mystery schools. And also,
yeah, 100%. It's in his own
simple
words.
fact that the 5th root race is called Aryan. So there's that as well. So all of that's very fascinating. And I completely agree with you on that aspect of.
Well, and he even says in his own words, the races that are not white were left over from previous worlds. And that's why they have to come back and reincarnate again to fix it, right? And especially for Black people. It's not the same for Asian. It was like the Inuit, which is Eskimo, and I think it was Asian. I'll double check, but he didn't like Native Americans. He's a little different than the Mormons are okay with that. They were weird about Black people for a long time. But he says the Black people are like animals, and that they're degressing in evolution to be an animal. And that he also said that it would be best if they got them all out of Europe. And so,
and I talked in depth when I did the episode I did on starseeds, and I tracked the entire starseed movement all the way back to eugenics and theosophy, and how even that movement within the New Age is built upon the idea that white people are the only ones that can be considered to commune with the gods. And I know that modern New Age movement won't sell you that, but it's what was the origins of the modern starseed movement. And this is where it came from. All of these guys we're talking about, Rudolph Steiner, Helena Blavatsky, Crowley, all of them, they believed this. So don't think for a minute, specifically if you're of a different race than white, that this needs to be something you're following.
No, definitely not. Unless, I mean, I'll tell you a little story. When I was looking through all the things, is one of the Waldorf schools got in trouble because when they were marking on their paperwork what ethnicity they were, right? And this was teachers, not students. They marked them all. They marked every single race. And they got in trouble for this. Actually, the government came down on them pretty hard and made them take like, sensitivity school and stuff, because they said, why would you do that? This was a government paper. And they said, because I've been all of them and now I'm white. And this isn't like, I understand what it's like to be you because maybe I thought I was that in a previous life. This is, I'm better than you because now I'm white, right? Like I've
Wow.
ascended better. And this is bad. Like this gets into, Hitler wasn't just looking to extinguish a certain people. He was actually looking at eye teeth. He was looking at markers of the Nephilim. Let's be honest. He was looking for canines that were big. He was looking for, red hair, certain eye color. Everybody wants to make this about just he didn't like Jews. No, why didn't he like the Jewish people? Because they're the first Adamic race, right, of the earth. Adam means ruddy, of the earth. And he didn't want that. They tried to repopulate this world with their thoughts of an Elohim hybrid thing. Like, honestly, I mean, sounds
Exactly.
crazy.
No, it actually doesn't. And I think people don't understand that deeper aspect about Adolf and what he was really trying to do. He was massively deep into the occult. And there are so many different rabbit holes when it comes to him. And I'm not going to get into that today. And crazy enough, in this day and age, there are quite a few people out there that think he was actually good, which is just absolutely mind blowing. Consider all the information that's out there about him to find, even books that he's written himself. So it's, again, go to the source. Don't
Yes.
listen to what other people are telling you about people. Go to the source of what these people are actually writing and saying. That's when you're going to find what they really think. And Adolf was deeply involved in the occult, but this all ties back into even what I just said, the real society, this Aryan race. It's not about an Aryan race of white people per se. It is the Aryan race of hybrids that they're looking for. They're looking for that advanced race. That's what they want to push. He didn't really like anybody that wasn't what he thought was that. That's what he was seeking out. That's what he was looking for. It had nothing to do per se with any real race on earth. It isn't like anybody unless you were of this divine bloodline. That's
And
what
he
they were
didn't
really
like
seeking out.
Nazis either. Like he wasn't a Nazi. And it was before, I just want it because we brought up Hitler and people are going to come for us. So I'm just going to say he wasn't a Nazi. And, they were very intimidated by him. Why would that be? Because he's spilling the beans on all this occultic mystery school stuff that they don't want out, So, yeah, that's
And he
why.
had his own agenda too. So he had a lot of agendas that were his own. And he just used the Nazi party as a vehicle for what he was really trying to accomplish. And we can do an entire episode that will probably be a Rumble only episode if we get deep down that rabbit hole of what he was really up to. But it's all very interesting. But to move it into Steiner and what he said about these entities, because he talks about when you get to the threshold. And again, I mentioned it and I keyed it off on the last episode to let people know that we're going to get into this actual entities at the threshold and what they actually are and what they can provide. And this is something that Rudolph Steiner goes deep into his book called Knowledge of the Higher Worlds and Its Attainment. And this was in 1904. And it's got two parts and it's very intense. I would say give it a read if you really want to know everything he's got to say about how you can tap into these other entities. I would suggest this: if you are a Christian and you're reading it, go into it with prayer and understand that he's giving you a guidebook, right? It's not like a book where he's telling you about root races. No, he's giving you a guidebook on how to do these things. So always approach these types of writings with caution. But the part two is what we're really concerned with. And the last two chapters, he's got the guardian of the threshold and then the great or second guardian of the threshold, because this is a two-part process to get to a place where, one, you can achieve this power over your astral body. And secondly, it's to be able to tap into what? The Akashic record, what we've been talking about this whole time. This is how you do it. So he starts out the guardian of the threshold, the second to last chapter. He says the important experiences marking the student's ascent into the higher worlds include his meeting with the guardian of the threshold. Strictly speaking, there are two, a lesser and a greater. The student meets the lesser guardian when the threads which connect willing, feeling, and thinking within the finer astral and etheric bodies begin to loosen. So he's talking about this is the first entity you get to when your astral form is starting to disconnect from your physical form. This is the first entity you're going to see. And he says, the greater guardian is encountered when this surrendering of the connections extends to the physical parts of the body, that is, at first to the brain. The lesser guardian is an independent being. He does not come into existence so far as the student is concerned until the student has reached the corresponding stage of development. Now, he actually starts quoting what the entity will tell you when you get to this threshold. And he says, I am that very being who shaped my body out of thy good and evil achievements. So, pause real quick. What this lesser entity is the essence of you. Everything that you've done, good or bad, creates this entity at the threshold. So this entity comes out of you. This is the entity that is you. It kind of made me think what you just said about the spirit sons of Jesus combining and becoming one. It's very similar to this. The good and evil achievements of you, the yin and yang, very Gnostic in nature, combined to make this entity that presents itself in front of you. As a matter of fact, the entity says, my spectral form is woven out of thine own life's account book, your own Akashic record.
This sounds just like Crowley after he did the what is it, Abramelin. And remember, they said he was never the same again. This sounds like if you achieve it, like you get that HGA, you know?
Correct. And this is when he was with Victor Newberg in the desert and they completed the 30 Aethers. And this is when he went into the city of the pyramids. And it's a whole process through the city of the pyramids while he's there. And when he basically was resurrected with his new spirit is when he was never the same again. As a matter of fact, Victor Newberg was never the same again. This is when that Crowley said that he became himself an ascended master, a secret chief. So yes, all of this verbiage between all of these different Gnostics and occultists, it's all the same. They may write it a little different, but it operates very much in the same way. Now, this entity says, till now thou hast been born me invisibly within thyself, and it was well for thee that this should be, for the wisdom of thy destiny, though concealed from thee, could thus work within thee, so that the hideous stains upon my form should be blotted out. Now that I have come forth within thee, that concealed wisdom too has departed from thee. I will pay no further heed to thee. It will leave the work in thy hands alone. I must become a perfect and glorious being or fall prey to corruption. And should this occur, I would drag thee also down with me into a dark and corrupt world. If thou wouldst avoid this, then thy own wisdom must become great enough here we go, talking to the initiate, you need to become great enough to undertake the task that other concealed wisdom, which is departed from thee. So you need to find that wisdom. You need to work hard enough to attain that wisdom. As a form visible of thyself, I will never for an instant leave thy side once thou hast crossed my threshold. So now this being who's saying that it's a part of you
It's crossing the abyss. Yeah.
Exactly. Will not leave you once you've crossed the threshold. So now this being will manifest at will at this point once you have passed the first threshold, once you've passed this threshold. It's absolutely mind-blowing that he's telling you how to do it. And to your point, it is verbatim in line with how every single alchemist and occultist has done this throughout the centuries.
Yep. It's 100%. And the scary thing is if you do this wrong, it's very bad. Some of these people have gone crazy. They've unalived themselves. Like some really horrendous things have happened to these people. And even the people that achieve it, like I know that Crowley looked up to Joseph Smith because we've talked about that but he died. Like none of this is awesome. So yeah, watch yourselves. Yeah.
And if we want to showcase any more how Rudolph Steiner is not a Christian, I will read a little footnote that he writes at the end of this chapter about this lesser guardian at the threshold. This is wild stuff. It will be gathered from above that the guardian of the threshold is an astral figure. So he's letting you know it's going to be a figure that manifests out of you and it's going to appear in front of you, revealing itself to the student's awakened higher sight, and is to this super sensible encounter that the spiritual science conducts him. It is a lower magical process. Ho, ho, ho. So it's a process, is it, Rudolph Steiner? It's a ritual, is it, Rudolph Steiner? To make the guardian of the threshold physically visible also. Oh, so we need to do a ritual to invoke this guardian of the threshold. In what way, shape, form, or fashion is this in the Bible? In what shape, form, or fashion is this Christian? I'm still trying to figure that out, Heidi. I've been digging. I'm looking for it. I can't find the nugget. I'm looking for it.
I was out when he said black people were animals. Like, I mean, geez Louise, if we want to be honest here, you know.
Yeah, and it's literally right there in his words. It's right there. It's verbatim. There's no real discussion on whether or not he wrote this or not. This is out of his own book. But it gets even better.
Most of his books are dictated from oral speeches that are verifiable that he said this. So
exactly. And the cosmic memory, we know, was written in a series of articles in the early 1900s. We talked about this. So he wrote a whole lot. We are never going to look at these writings and say someone else wrote it for him. We all know that he wrote these. So we know this is out of his mouth. So it gets even wilder as we get to the great or second guardian of the threshold of life and death. Oh, so he explains in the beginning, in the foregoing chapter, the importance of the meeting with the so-called lesser guardian of the threshold was explained. And it was seen that in this guardian, a being confronts the student whom the latter has himself brought into existence and whose body consists of the hitherto invisible results of the student's own actions, feelings, and thoughts. So we know that that first entity that you meet is something that comes out of you. It's a representation of all the things you've done, actions, feelings, thoughts, good or bad. That's what it is. These unseen forces have become the cause of his destiny and his character. And he realizes how he himself founded the present in the past. He can understand why his inner self, now standing to a certain extent revealed before him, includes particular inclinations and habits. And he can also recognize the origin of certain blows of fate that have befallen him. So when you're face to face with that first guardian, the lesser guardian, you realize, and this is a very, very Gnostic ideology, you realize the things you need to work on to kill your ego because your ego's in front of you. You realize all the bad things in front of you and you realize what you need to work on. So that's wild enough. And now we're going to start looking into how you tap into this second guardian. So at this point, you've passed the lesser grade, the lesser guardian. Now you're moving into the greater guardian, and now this guardian speaks to you. And he puts this in quotes. So he's, again, telling you what this being is talking to you about. And he says, I have in me the elements of a decaying world. They are at work in me, and I can only break their power little by little thanks to the new immortal elements coming to life within me. This is the path leading man from life to death. Could he but speak to himself with full consciousness at the hour of his death, he would say, the perishing world was my master. I am now dying as a result of the entire past with which I am enmeshed. So this lends to what you were talking about, that reincarnation piece, Heidi, where the evil side of you, and you even brought it into eugenics, you're trying to shed that old part and you're trying to renew yourself into a new person. Yet the soil of mortal life has matured the seeds of immortal life. I carry them with me into another world. If it had merely depended on the past, I could never have been born. The life of the past came to an end with birth. Life in this sense world is wrested from the universal death by the newly formed life germ. The time between birth and death is merely an expression for the amount wrested from the dying past by the new life, and illness is nothing but the continued effect of the dying portions of the past. So this greater guardian is telling you that you have to kill your old self. That's how you have to do it. But here's the weird part. When you're with the greater guardian, you're going to have this feeling of elation, a feeling that you are in the astral realm where you need to be forever. As a matter of fact, this greater guardian has to tell you to go back. You know why he tells you to go back? You got to lead more people to him.
Hey, what if I was white enough? I don't want to keep going back. It sounds like a mixture of mystery schools and Mormonism and Scientology, right? This jumping the body thing. You know what I'm talking about? Where they believe they can jump the body, and it's weird, like jump into another one, you know?
So that's a very interesting concept. And I did an episode called REM cloning, and I've talked to people who have had abduction sequences. And in those abduction sequences, they have said that their essence, soul, spirit was pulled out of their bodies and put into another body to perform missions for these entities. Now, this was against their own will. And in all cases, for the most part, they weren't Christian, but there have been some people who became Christians later that experienced some residuals of abductions. And I've had a lady named Fringe on my show, and she's absolutely amazing. And she's got some very, very wild stories when it comes to the government working with these entities to do this. And it's the idea of souls being moved with the power of these entities. And it leads directly into what we're talking about here. And it's very Gnostic and occult in nature. And it's also a side that she isn't as versed in. So when she's telling me this stuff, I'm just like, yeah, I've heard that before. They've been talking about this for centuries. We could even go into the idea of the homunculus, which has been talked about since Paracelsus. The idea that you can put an entity or soul into an artificial body. So none of these ideas are a stretch when you're looking at it through the lens of guys like Rudolph Steiner and some of these other occultists that have talked about it. They've talked about it for a long time. And this is part of their ideology. And what Steiner is saying here, after you meet this greater guardian, your goal is to come back out of this astral realm, the one you want to stay in, the one you want to be in. You have to come back and you got to teach more people and bring them there too. That doesn't sound like a cult.
That just sounds like I need more wives and more people over in this realm. Ha ha ha. Just saying. it always gets to the women at some point, right? And the whole bad part about this is I'm just taking a few more notes. And some of this stuff is labeled onto you if you're in this system as a kid. Like you're already classified as what you are as a little kid, and you know how much you're not the person you are today. And granted, he has a 7-year cycle, and I get to that, but like I just think that it's sad that they literally give you a name, and what you are, like melancholic is sensitive and inverted, and sanguine is lighthearted and takes things easy, and phlegmatic is calm and even tempered, and choleric is a risk taker. Well, geez, you're labeled straight out the gate. Like, how is that fair? Like, how is this really making you have any choices? Like what we talked about before. I just, I don't know about that.
It's interesting from a group of people that always scream free will that label you and put you in a box. And it's not designed for everyone to be able to escape this material world and move into this other realm to become an ascended master. It's only for people that are worthy, according to them, who they deem worthy. And never for a moment think that you're extra special because you've somehow tapped into something that you believe is divine. And I'm going to tell you right now, the people in the Bible who met with divine beings, and I'm not talking about negative ones, but positive ones, and met with Yahweh, for the most part, they went through levels of hubris, obviously, because everyone's flawed and they're human, but they were humbled, and they humbled themselves before God. They put everything back to God. It wasn't about them becoming something great. It was become lesser to put the glory to God, because he has put us here for that purpose. We're here to help people to do as Yeshua did when he was here. We're here to help others. We're here to connect to them. That's our divine purpose. It's not to become some star seed who thinks they're half alien and they've got the bloodlines of Jesus in them. And I know I just mixed three things together, but I've actually heard that mix before. So it's such, in the social media era, people are consumed with being special. I need to find the thing to be special. It's like the RH negative, right? There is a contingent of people who have RH negative who are running around saying that they are extra special, that they are more important than other people. Now, I'm not going to throw the idea out by any stretch that people that have RH negative might not have weird things. I've done extensive research on RH negative, and to be honest with you, my conclusion is it's inconclusive, because there are some very strange things involved with it. Is it possible that people that have that have some sort of Nephilim bloodline in them? It's possible. I'm not saying that it's not, but that shouldn't be your goal, to use that to be special. No, guess what? We're all special in God's eyes. That's the really cool part. We all have a purpose in God's eyes. When we find our purpose with God, that's special. We're already special. We don't need all these other occult trinkets and toys to become special. And that's all these occultists are consumed with, is becoming special. Oh, they'll lie to you and tell you that you're shedding the negative energies out of your body, you're killing your ego, all of these things. But in actuality, you're doing the opposite. You're inflating your ego. You're inflating your sense of worth. You're inflating the negative aspects that are in you. And you're becoming the complete opposite of what God's put us here on this earth to do.
Well, and to your point on this one, he had a lecture in 1906 called The Occult Significance of Blood. And this is the perfect time to stick this in here where you're speaking about that. But I do want to say one thing before I go into Steiner's speech about this. There's also been just as many studies on O positive blood with Native people saying that they're actually more special. So look, I talk about the RH factor to trace lineage because it's never happened again. And to me, that tells me there was some messing about. Okay. something happened, because that's not evolution. It's some kind of dynamic, purposeful thing that happened with people. And I do believe like elite tampering or whatever happened there with these things. I'm telling you, because if it's evolution, we would have hundreds of blood types by now, and we don't. It never happened again after 1948 that we know of, And so I think it's important. But also, when you look at this and what he says about it, right? He gets into this divine right to rule, not so much about the RH. He doesn't say that per se. He just talks about how the human soul and the spiritual substance connecting the universe is through blood. But then again, it goes back into ancestry. So what's he saying here, right? Well, let me make it clear for those that don't know. Blood mixing, and he doesn't mean O and A, okay, people? He means black and white. Exactly what he means. He means even, Japanese and white, or Japanese and black, or whatever the case may be. He doesn't think it should happen, period. And they also have like this weird connection to these, I want to say like a spirit animal over a population of a country. So like, I don't know what ours is, but like we shouldn't move. But like, what should Americans do? Because none of us are anything but a bunch of mutts. So I don't know what happens there. But the Africa should stay in Africa, like all of that. Like Mexico should stay in Mexico. And because these soul links to individuals go through the universal cosmic forces, and it needs to stay like pure, which is why then what happens, right, Joel? We get people sleeping with their grandmas or whatever, we'll flip it, grandpas, because the women have to have the babies. And then you have this that carries on clearly still into society today. And then we get all these problems, right? It's gross. It's sad for the children. I'll tell you, there is a polygamous sect of people right now alive in Utah that are called the Kingstons. Kingston. Okay, Kingston. And they believe they have the divine right to rule. And they believe that they are literally the blood of Rex Deus. Okay. Because Joseph Smith said so. Joseph Smith said he was the perfect combination of both sides of the coin, not only Mary, but Jesus, right? So he talks about the Ephraim and Manasseh, and he's the perfect one. So these people kept this, and they continue to this day to have children with their very close relatives. And it got so bad that luckily they got rich, lucky or unlucky, I don't know. Maybe they would have outlawed it if not. They got really rich. And by the way, they're a top donator to people like the Romneys and stuff when they ran, but whatever. And they let them go all the time. They don't prosecute them. And they've hired a geneticist to check their family lineage and all their little samples and tell them who to marry. Like, don't marry that cousin, marry that cousin or aunt or whatever. So, it just is asking for problems when we get into this, let alone that's just physical problems. My goodness. I don't know how you kill your ego when you're Jesus's kid. Like, I just don't know. So.
Yeah. And back to anyone that just joined us on this episode, joined my podcast on this episode, I did an extensive 4-part series on the bloodlines of Jesus. So check that out, because it was absolutely fun for me, because I really wanted to go through it.
Yeah.
And I really spawned off the whole idea from, generally it's a listener that says that, oh, RH negative is the bloodline of Jesus, and I have that and I'm special. That was literally what it was. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do a 4-part episode on this. I didn't actually say 4-part episode, but it ended up being
you didn't know
parts.
What you were in for.
Right. So, but to your point, and as we're wrapping this up, these occultists and guys like Rudolph Steiner, who mix in this form of Christianity in with these practices that are clearly not Christian, they do this for a reason. They do this to confuse people. And they're also telling you that by doing these rituals and joining these mystery schools and becoming an initiate, you can tap into the world soul. You can tap into the Akasha records, and you can receive knowledge from divine beings. And ultimately, that is what the Akashic records are. It's not like you're jumping into a book and you're reading these cool things. No, you're tapping into this to get knowledge to then bring it here and then be able to create whatever you want to create, right? Whether it's technology, whether it's a new religion, whatever you're told to do. And that's the ultimate goal of this. And this is happening now. It's just happening in a new form. We see it moving all through the New Age movement. We see it with Christ consciousness, which has become massively popular over the past 20 years to the point that people themselves think they can become Jesus, an ascended master. And it's flawed logic. And at the end of the day, it's an empty road. And I think that to truly live life fulfilled, we need to actually kill our egos by picking up your cross and following Jesus Christ, because that's what he asks us to do, to sacrifice for the greater good, to sacrifice what we want to do for what he wants us to do. And ultimately, when we get to that point, we live a way more fulfilled life. We start looking at things differently. We don't look at things in a selfish nature. We're looking to help others. We're looking to grow. We're looking to grow our spirituality in a way that we're communing with God daily. Those are things that we're supposed to be doing. But all of these other religions and Gnostic sects and different mystery schools of the occult will give you a nice little spin that sounds similar to what I said, but you'll notice that it's all ego driven and it's all very selfish at the end of the day. And who was the most selfish of all? Lucifer.
Exactly. Or to him, Lucifer, Aryan, and Sorat. That's there's a whole bunch of them. Yep.
There's a whole bunch of them. And you're right about that, Heidi. Well, guys,
Wild.
We had a blast doing this two-parter on the Akashic Records. I had a lot of fun with it. It was very interesting information to dig into. And Rudolph Steiner will definitely come up more on this podcast for sure. We'll definitely have Heidi back on the show. We've already talked about a few other projects we may end up doing. But Heidi, before we get out of here, can you tell everyone where to find you again if they didn't listen to the last episode?
Absolutely. And I thank you so much for any collaborations. I always have a fun time. We talk pre-show. It's just fun. I think it's a great time. So I appreciate you for having me on. And I love the research that you do. Like I said, twice I said about the Rex Deus. I can't say it enough, you guys. That was a great series. Please check it out. And, as for Steiner, this was quick and dirty, but like we would have been here for like, I don't know, 30 hours or something if we kept trying to. Oh my gosh. It's really deep. So anybody that is out there that's into anthroposophy, forgive us because we have to do it and make it digestible. Like what we know doesn't matter. It's how we say it so it can get out into the masses. Because a lot of people don't know anything about all this stuff. So like mystery schools and Gnosticism, all this stuff we've had to cover today. So as for me, I am Heidi Luv of The Unfiltered Rise. I am everywhere podcasts are served. I do have my own website now, unfilteredrisepodcast.com. You can check me out there. You're going to get twice as many episodes on Spotify as YouTube, once a week there, 2 to 3 times a week everywhere else. So check me out.
Thanks, Heidi, for being here. Guys, if you can, go to the merch store. I've got brand new merchandise up. I've even got fall and winter clothing up now for people that are looking for hoodies and long sleeve shirts and beanies and all that. I've got that up there now. Just go to freetherabbits.myshopify.com. On the way out, we're going to play my new single, Imposter. And you know what it is, guys. Go outside, touch grass, and get your tail out the hole.
find a house, locked in a boxcar with all of these clowns. Don't feel like I belong, but maybe I do. Cause when I look in the puddle, maybe I'm just a ruse. Or maybe I'm just confused. Ooh, I'm a gorilla in the jungle, but my mind's got me trapped in the zoo. Ooh, what you see is not what I see. Cause I could be on top, but I feel like I'm at the bottom. Feel like an imposter, my own enemy. Sometimes I feel like I lost my identity. Reflections can be deceptions on my effigy. Perceptions turn to objections on my sanity. I see things that my mind creates. I can't play it safe, cause no matter got a date with my destiny. I'm chasing dreams that feel like nightmares. Will they end? My reality's more friendly than pretend. And I don't know if my perception's innocent. I'm never satisfied, I'm looking to transcend. Real me gets confused with the clones I create on my own. Mind palace corridors to the lab, it's a throne. Pyramids of deception above the halls of a minty. If I leave, will I even miss me? Yeah. Face to face with my ambition, yeah. My position with me, I'm in competition, yeah. I could be superstitious, cause it feels like it's a sickness. What you see is not what